Welcome, MMA fans worldwide, to MMA Roundup, where we break down the biggest sports stories for you daily from our favorite sport, MMA. Today we have the PFL Saudi Arabia Investment Explained. Our agenda, we're going to go over PFL, what is it, how is it different than UFC in case you don't know, overview the PFL Saudi Arabia deal, talk about Saudi Arabia's 2030 plan, sports washing, how it can relate to this deal, and overall Saudi Arabia's 2030 plan, and Saudi Arabia sporting investments partnerships up to this point, which include LIV Golf, boxing, soccer, F1, racing, and WWE. We have a lot to go over. Let's get into it. The PFL, Professional Fighters League. PFL is different than the UFC. Obviously, you know the UFC. In case you don't, it was one of the first MMA organizations. UFC, you have fights, and boom, you get the title. PFL is set up like a traditional sport. Think of baseball, basketball, soccer, where there's a regular season, and you compete in that regular season. Now, in American sports, then you have a postseason, you get a title. PFL is the same way. You compete for regular season points, and then you go in the playoffs. Top four make it, and you do a semifinals and the final. Winner gets $1 million for winning the PFL championship. They also get a salary, so you can get a nice payday in the PFL. PFL has a men's division, a small women's division. They're looking to grow it. PFL is also trying to become a worldwide sport. UFC will hold events on different continents. One will hold different events on different continents. But PFL is looking to create a PFL in each continent. Right now, they have PFL North America. We'll call it United States. They've recently started this year PFL Europe, starting to grow. And pretty soon, they want to start PFL Africa, which is a part of this conversation we're going to have. So we're going to table it. PFL Middle East, a part of this conversation, as you can guess. Eventually, they want to get to PFL Asia, and they want to have a PFL on every continent. And then eventually they would do a PFL Champions League where each continent will send their champions and you see who's the best in the world. It's pretty cool, pretty innovative idea. Pretty cool. So explaining it again, I just talked about it. PFL Global. PFL is the number 2 MMA company worldwide, and it's the number 1 fastest growing by all key metrics, according to them. They are doing it with a championship. How is it set up? The PFL League season is a premium global with 25% of PFL fighters independently in the top 25 world ranked in 30 countries represented. They have 24 major brand sponsors, including Bose, Geico, U.S. Marine Corps, and Celsius Energy. Their events are on ESPN, ESPN Plus, and they can be streamed over 150 countries. They have partners like DirecTV as well, so that's how they're growing the brand. So that's how we get to today. The SRJ launched a strategic partnership with PFL. The SRJ is the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund. They created an investment specific fund inside their overarching fund that is specific for sports. So Saudi Arabia has a whole investment fund. They're investing in a bunch of different businesses, companies, sports. SRJ focuses strictly on sports. PFL is selling a minority stake to SRJ Sports, and SRJ Sports will help put on the PFL super fights in Saudi Arabia. So we talked about already that PFL only does regular season, postseason. They're going to create a pay-per-view only division, which is super fights. So you may have heard this guy named Francis Ngannou. He's going to be in a super fight. You heard of this person named Jake Paul. He's going to be in that super fight. So that's where they're going to make big bucks, and Saudi Arabia is going to host those events, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So the new branch, founded under the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund, SRJ, is going to help sign talent, as well as take care of the upcoming pay-per-view fight in Saudi Arabia in 2024. And that should happen in the first quarter of 2024, meaning January, February, or March. With the minor investment as well, they're going to create a new regional league called PFL MENA, that is Middle East and North Africa. They're going to promote and build events in the Middle East, North Africa regions starting in 2024. Who's from North Africa, or who's from Africa, excuse me? Francis Ngannou. And he was already named with his PFL contract, which we're going to talk about, one of the chairman and board members of PFL Africa. So he's going to be even more ingrained with the Middle East here, Saudi Arabia, to help build that out. PFL's mission is to become the global co-leader in MMA with our Fighter First mission, disruptive sport season format. Again, most MMA is you compete, then you compete, and you work up to the title. There's no on and off season. PFL has an on and off season. Another statement from the SRJ chairman. Today marks a new milestone for SRJ as we make our inaugural investment. Since SRJ was created, this is their first investment. SRJ is shaping a new era of sports in Saudi Arabia and accelerating the growth of domestic sports economy. The commitment is going to be worth more than $100 million. One more time. $100 million. At last check, PFL was worth around 500, 600,000. Excuse me. At last check, PFL was worth $500 to $600 million. So this is close to a 20% stake in the company. And there's opportunity for them to grow. So we really talked about this, so let's dive deeper now. The first super fight will be in the first quarter of 2024, the first 3 months of 2024. And who will be a part of it? Former UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou, as we talked about, and YouTuber turned prize fighter Jake Paul, who signed a deal with the PFL. So we're going to talk about both of these. Jake Paul is now also a minority investor in the PFL. He will be fighting in here. If you watched Nate Diaz fight or any lead up, he offered Nate Diaz $10 million after their boxing match to fight in the PFL. It would be under MMA rules. Jake will not go fight in the UFC. He has a feud with Dana White, but that's a different story we're going to not hold with. But also, as a PFL investment owner, as a PFL fighter now, he signed to them. He really will only fight in the PFL for MMA. They're going to do the super division as well, so he's only fighting in pay-per-view. He's not regular season. That will be in Saudi Arabia. When else did Jake Paul fight in Saudi Arabia? Oh, yeah, he fought Tommy Fury in Saudi Arabia, and they made a lot of money to go there and fight. Promote, massive. They loved it. They talked it up, and they got paid. Who else is fighting in Saudi Arabia? Oh, Tyson Fury against Francis Ngannou, who's also signed to top PFL. So Jake, Francis signed to PFL. Fury brothers fighting, boxing in Saudi Arabia. PFL, Saudi Arabia now together. You're starting to see these connections here. You're starting to get the wheels turned. You see what we do here. So Francis is with the PFL. His deal with the PFL is 2 or 3 fights initially. Guarantees a high 7 purse for each fight. 7 figures, so multi-million dollars. A split of the event net profits. So you bring the crowd, you get paid. And also the whatever pay-per-view revenue comes with it. He's an ambassador for the PFL. He's on the board of PFL Africa. And his opponent gets a minimum potentially of $1 million for showing up. So he's really trying to help out everyone, not just himself. And he gets the box as well still, which is where the Tyson Fury comes. So Ngannou left the UFC. He felt like he was not getting paid his worth. And that's why he looked and tried to find the best deal. And he signed with PFL. His deal is amazing for PFL. Dude's about to have generational wealth, and he earned it. If you don't know his story, go look it up. It's just a rags to riches story, coming from Africa to get to Europe to get to the US. It's unbelievable. It will be a movie one day. So as we said, Francis is fighting Tyson in Saudi Arabia. So again, all these connections are not because of coincidence. Francis has never had a professional boxing match before. Tyson's a linear champion, never lost. You know, they're pretty similar, besides for the height of 6'9" for Tyson versus Francis is 6'4". But Francis has that one-punch knockout power. He's going to be training like a dog. He's wanted this for a while. So I think this will be a closer fight than most people expect. Obviously, Tyson's got the head movement. He's really good in going around. But if Francis touches you, you're out. It doesn't matter how big the glove is. Saudi Arabia will be this fight. It's coming in October. So you can get it. And then Francis' next fight will be in Saudi Arabia again a couple months later in the PFL. So hopefully that gives you a quick backing of the PFL, the different characters in the PFL. There's much more like on the back end board members, but that's the face of the franchise, and those are the people who are going to be drawing in the box office. Now let's take it more to the Saudi Arabia side. Why would they want to invest in the PFL? The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has a vision called Vision 2030. This is put out by Mohammed bin Salman. He is the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. You may have heard his name. He is a controversial figure depending on what side you sit on. There were some issues with the journalist from DC where they say he ordered his killing, I'm not here to say what is right or wrong. I have absolutely no information more than what is out there publicly, but it's up to you to make your own informative and decisions based off the facts that we can present and what we know. There's also issues with Saudi Arabia around human rights. So that's where the next part will come to sports washing. But what we're going to be talking about initially is the Vision 2030. As the leader of Saudi Arabia, it's his goal to obviously run the country, run the kingdom. How can he make the lives better of the people around him that he's running and his citizens? Let's make this a bit bigger for you really quickly just so we can see it better. So in this picture, the Vision 2030, what is Saudi Arabia known for? What is the Middle East known for? It is known for oil money. And this was their main economy for a lot of time. We're talking like 1900s, could go back. However, what's happening today? Global warming, electric cars, alternative energy. So he can't have his company, aka his kingdom, be relying on oil money 24/7. He owns basically all that stuff. So when I say company, it's because that's where he gets the money. It all goes to him as the ruler of the kingdom in his respective family. So he needs to diversify the economy of Saudi Arabia for the betterment of his citizens and the people who live there, but also for him and himself to be able to be successful and bring more in. So what are some of the type of things he's trying to do? He wants to have unemployment rate at 7%, come down from 11% by 2030. He wants over 1 billion all non-oil government revenues by 2030. He wants 50% of all non-oil exports to be part of the gross GDP by 2030, up from 16%. So this is the big thing we're talking about. He wants half of the exports coming out of Saudi Arabia to not be oil, up from 60% in 16. That's 14 years. That's a big, big, big jump. And that's how we're going to talk about some of the stuff he's doing. He wants power generation capacity at 75 gigawatts by 2020, which obviously already passed. Public investment fund, which is the sports investments we're talking about. He wants private sector contribution to go up, those businesses that people run. And then visitors, 30 million people by 2030 coming to Saudi Arabia every year. The female labor force participation up in 2030 by to 30% from 22%. So he's really looking to try to grow the economy and grow the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to become a global power. Another thing he's doing as well is the Riyadh season. If you've never heard this before, Riyadh is one of the biggest cities in Saudi Arabia. Riyadh season is known for entertainment. It's a way to boost tourism, boost activity in the country. It's an initiative, a part of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's vision for 2030. There's over 100 events, concert adventures that are brought in all over Riyadh in celebration of the nation under a unifying theme. Some of the things that happen: Area 51, VR games, music, sculptures. Kronos, there's a bunch of singers coming in. You may have seen Beyonce, Post Malone. World-renowned singers are getting paid millions of dollars to come in. WWE comes in. They have multiple events in Saudi Arabia a year now. We'll talk about that when we get to the sports part. Riyadh season has big football matches. So last year, PSG got paid fat to come in. Obviously, they are owned by Qatar. So for them to come into Saudi Arabia, a good amount of money, and they played the Saudi Arabian team. Obviously, there are people in Saudi Arabia now getting paid to play soccer there every day, and we'll talk about that. We talked about big concerts and conferences that are coming in. Saudi Arabia's ultimate goal is to host the 2030 or 2034 World Cup, and they want to host the Olympics as well. So if they can get either of those, it will say we are a global power. We're here. Qatar just hosted the World Cup, and that showed that, hey, are they there? Was that sports washing? Did they deserve it? Was it corruption? Well, that's a whole different story. It plays a little part, but I can dive deep into that. But the question with Saudi Arabia and the Olympics, if they can get that and they can do the 2030 plan, they will say we deserve to be recognized as one of those global powers in the world. Boxing matches are part of the Riyadh as well. Francis and Tyson, early October, is kicking off the festivities Riyadh. And it's going to be a global event. They're going to be marketing it. They already started. So that takes us to where the last task is sports washing. What is sport washing? You may have heard the term before, but to define it, sports washing is the promotion of sporting events to distract attention from a controversial activity. So you use sport, any sport it may be, to try to turn a blind eye to something you're doing that may be frowned upon or illegal. So that way people don't see it, they don't acknowledge it, and they focus on the sport, and you can continue to do the bad. Or the bad is in the past, and you want to use sports to try to drown out the past. Some things that people say Saudi Arabia do that are considered not good for society. They still don't have equal rights for women in some cases, human rights issues. They persecute people for trying to use their voice and freedom of speech. Migrants, they don't treat the best as well if you're not native to Saudi Arabia, especially people potentially crossing over the border. We talked about Qatar winning the the World Cup. They used a bunch of migrants to build all those different stadiums and literally build cities that weren't there 10 years ago. And there was a lot of human rights issues that people swept under the rug. But with the cover of sports washing, the Olympics being there, the World Cup being there, people didn't focus on it as much. Before the games, it was massive. Once the games happens, people focused on the games. That is sports washing. And they used the World Cup to be able to invest and build out Qatar, build out the cities. Now they have the infrastructure to continue to grow. Other things as well, you don't just need to use sport. You can use concerts, anything that bring people in to take you away. Abu Dhabi is Emirates, a big sponsor of multiple football teams around the world. They use ads with the Player of the Year Haaland and other up-and-coming players or well-renowned players to get you to come visit Abu Dhabi. They're getting paid extremely nice to be able to be there. And of course, it takes us to soccer, which we'll touch on more in a little bit. How much they're spending on players. They grow the Saudi Pro Soccer League and get them to come in there. Messi was getting paid multiple $100,000 just to post on his Snapchat, his Instagram, saying come visit Saudi Arabia. So they're flashing out money to help that 2030 plan by getting visitors come in there, tourism, and making the country look a bit different than what it used to be in the past. And that's up to you to decide if that's okay or not. The big one globally as well is LIV Golf, the startup golf league they created to be in contention with the PGA. They put out hundreds of $millions to players that come over here. And golf for LIV, the tournament's a bit different than PGA as well. It's only 3 days versus 4, and you play in groups versus solo. So they have done a good job at getting LIV off the ground. Apparently, it's not being profitable, which is why they are going to try to merge. This was a big story of them coming together. How do you reintegrate the people who left for LIV? How do you integrate Saudi into the PGA Tour? They would become a major investor in there. They would help run the PGA. So now is it just a Saudi tournament versus the PGA? So there's a lot of money, $3 billion plus invested into this for them to continue to grow. And there's the sports washing. Now are they using investments around partnerships around LIV as well to try to grow the name? That's for you to decide. And boxing is the last big one in sports washing, where they have matches in there. They paid $80 million for Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk to be boxed there. They paid $60 million for Anthony Ruiz Jr. and Joshua's rematch. So again, this was what they would consider sports washing. Come here, enjoy boxing, see the country. Don't be looking at some of the stuff that's happened in the past when it comes to our country. And that takes us to today, which is sports. So now that's sports washing. Let's dive into a little bit more of the sports. There's 4 teams in the Saudi Pro League that are owned by the Saudi Public Investment Fund. You're going to recognize these teams because they are the ones who bought the big players. Saudi itself bought Newcastle, the public fund, for $409 million. Qatar owns PSG. There's other countries like that own Manchester City. So there's a lot out there for these countries, and they're using sports to then we own them and get people to come here, and they can use them as a promotion device. Saudi Arabia is going to bid $40 billion for the FIFA World Cup in 2030. If they don't get this, 2034. They just hired Mancini, the old Italian coach. He won EPL with Man City. For him to help grow Saudi Arabia's football team, hopefully be competitive at this point, kind of like USA will host in 2026. We want to be there. They want to peak them for 2030. Who has Saudi Arabia bought players-wise? Ronaldo, Conte, Koulibaly. They just bought Neymar, Mendy. It's been over $1 billion worth in deals, sales, and what they get. So here's Neymar. Mbappe, they offered him a whopping basically $1 billion with this, plus the fee to sign him. Throwing money out there. So again, throwing money at getting players to come here, promote the country, and also be able to play there and grow the brand, grow the country. There's now F1 events every year inside Saudi Arabia. They also help own the team through investment. So a 10-year deal with Formula One for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix at Jeddah Circuit for at least the next 10 years, $650 million. $65 million a year to host the event. Obviously, we know what Vegas is about to be with the F1 coming up. That's worth over $1 billion, they say, in economic value, so a lot here. Formula One Aramco, which is the gas company owned by the Saudi Public Fund, 10-year sponsorship deal. So you bring someone over, now you're using your gas company, your sponsorship, again, continual. You have WWE, $1 billion for WWE to hold 2 events per year in Saudi Arabia. And that next event should be coming up in November, I think. That takes us back to the beginning of how you get to the PFL and the sports investment together. So this is just another arm of Saudi Arabia investing in different sports. Now there'll be a part owner in it to be able to hold events, build a brand, and continue to grow it. So it's up to you to decide. Is this good for PFL? Investment, be able to grow, get more fighters? Or is this bad that they're having potentially controversial owner with a checkered past who could potentially be using sports to try to wash that away? Please comment your thoughts. Let me know. Did you like this video? Did you like this video? Love putting out this analysis and breakdowns for you to help you understand and break down the world of sports. Thank you for watching. Out.